Hi, everyone. It's June 5th. I'm Benita Brach here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Let's get to your top headlines this afternoon. Well, a mother on Vancouver Island is warning people to check their prescriptions before taking them. She says her son usually takes medication for ADHD, but found the pharmacy accidentally dispensed hydromorphone instead. The parents say this was a very close call for their son.
Immediately your mind goes to the worst case scenario. Like, what if we didn't notice we gave him that medication, an adult's dosage of morphine, sent him off to school? You know, the results could have been catastrophic, and it just makes my heart sing to think about what could have happened.
CBC News reached out to Loblaws, the company that owns the Shoppers Drug Mart pharmacy. It says it was a case of human error that won't happen again. A memorial mass will be held in Vancouver this evening to honor and pray for victims of the Lapu Lapu Day Festival tragedy. It comes 40 days after a car ramming attack left 11 people dead and dozens more injured. The date is significant in Filipino Catholic tradition as it marks the end of a mourning period. The attack suspect faces 8 counts of second-degree murder and could face more. Okay, let's give you a wildfire update. So BC Wildfire is expecting a challenging 3-day period ahead for parts of northern BC. It's expecting local wind gusts to reach up to 70 kilometers per hour and extreme fire behavior. Starting now, there will be a campfire ban for Dawson Creek, Fort St. John, and Fort Nelson fire zones. You can just see here on the map, the 2 wildfires of note remain as the Summit Lake wildfire and the Kiskatna River wildfire below it as well. Okay, and if you are a fan of Costco's food court, some changes are coming to the one in Vancouver downtown. So starting in August, if you want to visit the store's food court, you'll need to present a Costco membership card in order to enjoy a cheap hot dog or a slice of pizza. And here's what some customers had to say.
Maybe it will be less people buying the things in the court because so much people don't have the membership.
Stadium shows over here. That's when people line up over here, so it's a choice.
I mean, there's other alternatives, so I'm not too mad about it, but their poutine is pretty good, so I think they'll lose out a bit.
It's pretty much imposed in many Costco's in the Lower Mainland. Only this one is really laxed about this, and there's always a big crowd because it's downtown. And I'm for it myself because it's a member benefit, so you should be a member to get those prices and those benefits.
We spoke to a Costco representative over the phone, and it said that the company's policy is to require membership for the food court. Okay, here's a question for you. Have you seen a moonwalking whale? Check this out. This video posted to social media shows a killer whale in Howe Sound swimming backwards. And one marine mammal zoologist says it's a rare behavior, but has been seen in some transient killer whales.
Shows a behavior that is really not often seen and also not often displayed. And it's thought perhaps that it's part of a prey sharing event. It's a little bit gruesome, but probably when they are tearing an animal, these are transient or big killer whales, so they eat marine mammals. And so they could be ripping a prey species into pieces to share amongst the family members.
Yeah, something perhaps you didn't expect. And she says behaviors like moonwalking are a good reminder that killer whales, they are top predators in the ocean and can be ferocious when they want to be. And that's what we have for you so far. You're watching CBC News BC. Stay with us. BC Today is coming up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. There are still many questions surrounding the province's efforts to expand involuntary care in BC, including the opening of 18 new beds at a residential facility in Maple Ridge. Health Minister Josie Osborne will join me to discuss how those beds would work and why she feels they're needed. And budget cuts are plaguing school districts across the province. Advocates say the students' needs are at stake. We'll talk to teachers in Burnaby and ask you about what programs you're worried about losing in your school district. And a new documentary released chronicles the Fairy Creek protests on Vancouver Island against old-growth logging. We'll hear about that. Well, BC is taking steps to expand involuntary care for people who have mental health and addiction issues. Now, involuntary care is what happens when, under the Mental Health Act, a person is deemed as not willing or able to seek help when experiencing mental illness that can affect safety. This week, the province announced 18 new involuntary care beds in a residential setting in Maple Ridge. And joining me now is BC's Health Minister Josie Osborne. Good afternoon, Minister. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me.
Why are these 18 involuntary care beds in a residential care setting needed?
Well, everybody deserves a safe and dignified place to live. They deserve access to care. But there are people who suffer from severe mental illness, sometimes combined with a substance use disorder, maybe acquired brain injuries from that, who need a high level of care. They're people who have been certified under the Mental Health Act, but they deserve a warm and dignified place to live as well. What we've done by opening 18 new beds in these two homes out in Maple Ridge at Alouette is provide that very residential-like, home-like care setting for people where they're going to receive supports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in a secure, safe, and dignified way.
When you say people deserve the care they need, we heard repeatedly from people on our program on Monday who say they have been trying to get into treatment. One caller said she was now waiting to move to Ontario because she couldn't get a bed here in BC. We spoke with the Together We Can Society, who said this is a step in the right direction, these new involuntary care beds, but at the same time, their voluntary treatment facility has a wait list of 45 people. So when you're talking about involuntary care, is that a last resort? And if so, what's being done to intervene before getting to that last resort?
Yeah, it's really important to separate out involuntary care from the voluntary system of treatment and recovery that we are building throughout British Columbia. I think everybody's well aware that the impacts of the toxic drug crisis have been just devastating on people and on families and in communities. And in dealing with that and dealing with the severe mental illnesses that some people present with, these concurrent disorders together make it unable for people to help themselves or to seek that help for themselves. And so there's a very clear process under which people are certified under the Mental Health Act and then taken into care systems. There are people who have effectively been living in psychiatric wards and hospitals, for example, who deserve better, more home-like care. And that's who these homes are designed for. But we still have so much work to do in continuing to build out that voluntary system of treatment and recovery. And that's even before treatment or recovery is required. The amount of mitigation, prevention, intervention, and establishing more counseling services for people, the Foundry system for youth to be able to access mental health supports, preventing people from getting into these situations in the first place, and preventing things from getting worse. That's all part of our commitment to build out this seamless continuum of care. And this particular operation, this particular set of homes in Alouette in Maple Ridge addresses a very, very unique portion of the population.
And you mentioned at the press conference that there are patients already waiting to move into this new facility. Can you expand a little bit more on who this would cater to? Who would be the patients here?
That's right. So we know that clients will be moving in, residents will be moving in as early as next week. Initially, they'll be coming from tertiary facilities or larger hospitals from the Vancouver coastal area, but we'll be working with Fraser Health as well to identify those people who can move into these homes. And I got the chance to tour the facility myself and can absolutely attest. It's a a very home-like feeling. So they are 2 large homes. They're set in beautiful grounds with forests behind them, gardens that are being built and established, and a kitchen and a gathering area, bedrooms, bathrooms, and it has a really home-like setting. So it's different than what people have been living in right now, which literally can be like a hospital ward. It's a much more suitable place. This will provide a model for expanding this type of care and residential setting for people who need it throughout British Columbia.
How long do you expect people would stay there? What would determine when they would be discharged?
Well, each person is under a care plan. They have a treatment plan. They're working with a group of clinicians and support workers. And the circumstances will differ for each person. But somebody might be there for months, but somebody might be there for a very extended period of time, depending on the severity of their mental illnesses and the conditions under which that they are experiencing. They will not have to leave, though. They won't have to move. This is a place that provides that safe and dignified care for people in a really home-like setting, but in a way that helps keep communities safe too.
Can they choose to leave if they felt like it?
So people will be allowed to leave the property under supervision with a person, but again, each person will go through, they'll have a different care plan for them, be working with clinicians who undertake the assessments. It is possible, and it does happen, of course, that people who are certified under the Mental Health Act and are held in secure places are decertified or are released and on extended care, for example, where a community setting is much better for them and their healing and recovery. But for this particular population, again, we're talking about people who are experiencing some of the worst sets of concurrent disorders, and acquired brain injury, of course, from repeated overdoses. It's a very serious thing and can result in a person needing this kind of care for a very long time, and in some cases for the rest of their lives.
Now, you talk about a care plan. When we say involuntary care, what does that apply to? Is it just the fact that they are there? Does that apply to treatment as well, whether it's therapies or medication? Is that also involuntarily administered?
Well, involuntary care is a very serious thing, and this is why it is guided by the Mental Health Act, and that people must be assessed, and they must be deemed by professionals, by clinicians, experts in this area, as meeting the criteria for being certified under the Mental Health Act, and then can be taken into a facility. And it could be a psychiatric ward in a hospital. It could be a place like this that we're building here at Alouette Homes, where they can receive the care that is deemed to be in their best interest. And again, I say this is a very serious thing because balancing the rights of an individual to make decisions for themselves against the risk that they may present to themselves, their own health, and those around them is a very serious thing. And that's also why enabling people to receive advice on their rights, ensuring that people have the ability to be reassessed, and that is constantly looked at is a really important aspect of secure or involuntary care.
So those treatment decisions are made for them then?
The treatment decisions are made for them by a team of experts, by a team of clinicians, people who are trained and certified to do exactly this kind of work.
And so you talk about, we had a lot of questions as well on Monday about the human rights. How do you balance the individual's rights against what is deemed under the Mental Health Act as a need for this forced treatment?
Well, I think that is the crux of the matter for a lot of people, and it's a very difficult thing, I think, for many people to wrap their heads around about when is the right time to take away an individual's right to make decisions for themselves. And I think too that people see people struggling out in the community and maybe in their neighborhood, or they know people, and it's a very difficult thing to watch that too. I think everybody wants to ensure that people have access to the care that they need. And in a situation where a person just simply is not capable of making that decision for themselves anymore, that there is a system in place where this care can be delivered. But the checks and balances that are in place, again, about being reassessed, about ensuring that people are advised of their rights and that they have abilities to appeal decisions if necessary, this is all part of it. I think most people know that we've committed to undertaking a review of the Mental Health Act and to modernizing the Act. And this is a piece of legislation that has not changed significantly in a very long time. And it's important to do this work to ensure that we are getting that balance right and that we are able to provide the dignified care that people need and that we're able to help protect them and the communities and people around them, and so that families can see and ensure that the people they love are getting the care that they need as well.
And who will be in charge of oversight to ensure that standards are kept, that there is that dignified approach? Will it be your ministry keeping tabs on this program as it rolls out?
Well, Alouette Homes is being run in combination by Vancouver Coastal Health with the nonprofit society that has a lot of experience in the kind of support for people like this. They are, of course, again, clinicians, experts, people who are working with them, subject to all the rules and regulations that are well defined in the Mental Health Act, and will be making the decisions as to who is able to enter Alouette Homes, who is going to live there, and how long that they're going to stay.
And what will be the kind of care, the follow-up care once a person is discharged, once a person leaves? What's in the community for them? Because as we know, these are conditions that affect someone for life.
Yeah, Alouette Homes is designed really, again, for people with the most serious mental illnesses, with concurrent disorders and substance use, and people who will receive 24-hour supervision and care 7 days a week. These are folks who will be under different treatment plans, and they'll have the ability, again, to, they're living in these homes. They have the ability to spend time outdoors and to undertake activities. And it's up to care teams, it's up to the experts and clinicians to make that determination as to when a person might be ready to move out of a place like Alouette Homes into supportive recovery homes. And they'll be taken patient by patient and day by day, week by week, month by month.
Minister, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Josie Osborne is BC's health minister. She joined us from Victoria. It's now 12:18. This is BC Today. And we asked you for your thoughts on involuntary care, and here are some of your emails. Lloyd writes, I'm worried that we are actively looking away from the real issues that affect people's lives, and thus their suffering, undermining civil liberties to treat people by forcible treatment, arguably confinement, doesn't address root issues of money laundering, historical treatment of minorities due to racism, childhood abuse, or the tragedies of living, i.e. the loss of a family member. We separate people from the rest of society when they do not behave in ways we understand, tolerate, or accept. That is what the legal system is designed for. So the conversation I'd like to hear is, what is the context behind the reason for a person's behavior? I don't think that conversation is being had to the real root causes of this context. Marjorie writes, I wish people wouldn't voice the question as, is this what BC needs? This situation, whether in BC or elsewhere, needs many, not one approach. Every person has different needs, different illnesses. Some people might have reached the stage where involuntary care is the only way to help them, but we have to stop looking at each intervention or bill or law as the answer. It is a multifaceted problem and needs many approaches from each sector: mental health, supportive housing, transitions, and work opportunities. Joan writes from Burnaby, yes, it's a good idea, although 18 beds is a drop in the bucket. We need to get these persons off the streets and into care places to deal with their psychoses so they don't go around cutting people's hands off or driving vehicles into crowds. Why is no one asking these questions? The issue is critical and needs radical solutions. Joan, thank you to you, and thank you, Marjorie and Lloyd, for your email. Our address again is bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, school districts around the province are weighing their budgets and programs as well, given what they see as tight budgets for each district. The Burnaby Teachers Association is calling on Education and Childcare Minister Lisa Baer, Premier David Eby, and the province to increase funding to public education. Now, the Burnaby School District's proposed 2025 and 26 budget includes $4.2 million in cuts that the teachers say will harm student services and learning conditions. We're going to find out more about what programs are on the chopping block there. And we're asking you as well, what are the cuts that you're anticipating in your own school district? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or email bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining me now is Alex Peters, president of the Burnaby Teachers Association. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me about the programs that are being considered to be cut.
Yeah, so some of them, the budget's been passed, so that's what's going forward for next year. So some of the important things that are being cut are the Mandarin immersion program that we have. It's starting a phased out program. They're also cutting the elementary custodians. So currently we have 34 full-time custodians for 41 schools, and there's going to be 6 custodians. The remaining schools will have an on-call custodian to come in. Also, we're losing 3 secondary counselors in our secondary schools. And the grade 7 band program has been cut. So currently there's about 1,200 students who participate in the grade 7 band program, and that's been cut for September.
Okay, what's your reaction to that?
It's really upsetting for all of the students and teachers. These are really important programs that we have in Burnaby that provide opportunities for students, for extra opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise, as well as students in some of the advanced placement programs. Gifted students are now not going to have those supports. And the cut to custodians is something that's going to be felt by students, parents, and teachers across the district.
What have you heard from the district itself in terms of what brought it to these decisions?
Yeah, so they've had in the past kind of a surplus, a savings account of money, but that's all been used up by portables. It went from about $10 million a few years ago to like $10,000 this year. Every portable that they've had to buy costs about $500,000, and that comes out of the school board's operating budget. And so they're just having to cut anything that's not directly supports that are required for students. So any extra programs and things are being cut in the district.
Yeah, what do you make of that? Think about band, and I have kids in the Burnaby School District who have done band, and so I understand the importance of these programs. But if you look at what's the most critical, I suppose, are these places where you can consider some reductions in the face of tight budgets?
Yeah, I mean, we understand why the school district's coming forward with these cuts. They don't really have any other options, and that was something that the school board chair mentioned at the school board meeting. They're just in the situation where they do not have enough funding from the province to provide any of these things that are kind of considered extras.
Mm-hmm. And so you're calling on the province to intervene?
Yes.
What do you want from the education minister?
So we need to increase the per pupil funding in BC. All school districts in the province are in the same situation as Burnaby. They're just not getting enough money. So for example, there's a funding deficit of about $340 million for inclusive education. So that's from what school boards are currently paying out to what is actually they're getting from the province. And that money has to come from somewhere. So it's coming from other programs.
Okay, and we do, as you mentioned, these are issues facing districts around the province. So we want to hear from our audience too, wherever you are in BC. What are the programs that you're worried about for next year if you have kids in this public school system? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone or send us an email, bctoday@cbc.ca. Justin is calling us now from Victoria. Hi, Justin. What are your concerns about school program cuts?
Hey, how's it going? Good. We once saw the music programs try to get cut from our local high school, and that would have been a huge bummer. They've got a great marching band. That's a whole big thing there. And we know, particularly with music, how it can aid in a lot of like brain development and benefits to various aspects of cognition, right?
Sure.
So they look for these things that they see as frivolous under, I guess, the more capitalist ideal, without considering that, these things, I'm sure they're arts, but they do, in fact, have, pretty clear-cut benefits to society at large.
Yeah, so you're saying don't underestimate the importance of these programs.
Absolutely, and I'm always curious why, as private schools also receive government funding, why don't we cut funding to private schools instead? If you can already afford the $10,000 a year in tuition, I'm sure you can afford, a little bit more, and that money could be more properly redirected. I can't recall where it was. There, one of the European countries that just said to heck with it, got rid of private schools, and all of a sudden, people in a higher income bracket were more than happy to donate large sums to their public schools, and everybody saw better outcomes in education overall.
Okay, yeah, we'll look into that example. So, funding for private schools then is your question, Justin. Why does that continue? Thanks so much for the call. Yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that is a big issue that we discuss a lot as teachers. Why there's so much funding that goes to the private schools and why we're not just using that money to fund the public schools.
That's been an ongoing discussion, hasn't it?
Yes.
And so, for people who do attend private schools, they see this presents choice in the education system. So what do you say to that?
Well, and then because the money is going to fund the private schools, it's not going to fund the public schools, which means then there's not choice for students in the public schools. Like now in Burnaby, there's not going to be band, there's not going to be Mandarin immersion, there's not going to be gifted programs.
Love to hear from you on this as well. What are your concerns when it comes to programs being cut from various school districts around the province? We know that they are either passing these budgets or about to pass these budgets over these weeks. So let us know what programs are on the chopping block where you are. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And I'm joined by Alex Peters, who's president of the Burnaby Teachers Association. And I know that in Burnaby, you're also facing really an increase in the school population. So how do you see the education funding meeting the needs of a growing student population?
Yeah, so that's something we really struggle with. Like most of our schools are over capacity, and the building of new schools takes such a long time, if they're even approved, that it's a huge issue at all our schools. And teachers are just finding that they don't have the ability to provide the supports that they need for the students.
How so?
So, for example, like when you get a new class, you just get an empty classroom with desks and chairs, and you're responsible as the teacher for providing all the learning materials. So whether that's a primary class that you need math manipulatives to learn how to make patterns, or novels in an intermediate class, those are things that now teachers just have to provide out of their own pocket. There's no money to set up a classroom. And teachers are also feeling that they just don't have the extra supports, like when counselors are getting cut, or the province said that they were going to put in an EA in every primary classroom, and that has not happened. And so teachers are feeling that students that have learning disabilities and special needs they're not able to support them. Only about 13% of teachers in the province feel that they are actually able to provide the supports that they need for those students.
Okay. We're getting some more calls on this now as we ask you around the province, what are the school program cuts that you're expecting or that you're worried about for the coming school year? Love to hear from you if you're a parent. It's 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. If you have a child perhaps in the private school system, you can weigh in too on that point that our earlier caller made, saying why is public school funding or public funding going to private schools? What are your thoughts on that too? I'd love to hear from you. Our email address as well is bctoday@cbc.ca. My guest, Alex Peters, president of the Burnaby Teachers Association, will continue our conversation on school programs and school budgets in the next half hour. And in about 15 minutes from now, we'll hear about a new documentary that has chronicled the protests at the Fairy Creek watershed on Vancouver Island. All that coming up after the CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. BC's ministers are set to head to Europe, hoping to strengthen the province's tech industries. The government says Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation Diana Gibson and Minister of State for Trade Rick Glumac will be visiting 3 major tech conferences in London, Amsterdam and Paris. Gibson says they will be meeting with investors, government officials, and other stakeholders. The medical isolation of some prison inmates during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic is now the subject of a class action lawsuit. The lead plaintiff claims inmates at the Mission Medium Security Institution were confined to their cells for more than 23 hours a day. He says in an affidavit that some prisoners developed bed sores and resorted to self-harm. And Environment Canada says the wildfires in northeastern BC are likely to cause poor air quality and visibility. The weather agency has issued a special weather statement warning elderly residents, young children, and those with chronic health conditions to avoid strenuous activities outdoors. And now taking a look at the forecast on the North Coast, rain this afternoon with a high of 14, highs up to 22 and mainly cloudy in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, increasing cloudiness with a high of 19, highs getting close to 30 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly sunny with a high of 29. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, lots of sunshine this afternoon with highs up to 25 inland. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Did you see or hear about that video of the moonwalking whale?
I did not.
I don't even know if those two words go together. Moonwalking whale, but there's apparently a video of a whale that was seen traveling backwards. So this is now going viral. This video of the moonwalking whale. And apparently it is a practice that they do. Oh, there it is. We're showing it right now. And and Allison
I did not see it.
McGillivray took this video. So you can hear her kind of going
backwards. Why is he going backwards?
Why is he going backwards? Kind of like, the moonwalk. And apparently this is to do with predatory practices, as it is, of course, a predator, and it is part of their feeding. So I said, does that mean the whale is moonwalking because it has to eat it, eat it, eat it? Yeah.
I'm sorry, who did you say that to?
Someone who said it'd be okay for me to say it on air.
Interesting. Bad call.
That was... Gonna go back to that
that was
person.
Cute, Michelle. Hilarious. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Good one.
It took a long time to get there, too.
Sure.
Rob,
it was a long walk.
You moonwalk back to your desk now.
Okay,
thanks, Rob. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Who knew I'd start singing Michael Jackson on the show? The day has come. It is 12:34. Welcome back to BC Today here on CBC. And I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for joining us. We are discussing program cuts and budget cuts coming to districts around the province as they deal with their budgets for the coming school year. And we're asking you, what are the programs that you're worried about in your school district? And we're talking with the Burnaby Teachers Association right now, who say that, and it has been passed in Burnaby. So their budget looks at the grade 7 band program being cut, custodians reduced as well, things like that. And so asking you, what are those programs that you're worried about where you live? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Alex Peters is with me, who's president of the Burnaby Teachers Association. And so, Alex, the Burnaby Teachers Association is calling on the province to step in with funding. And so it's that per pupil funding, right, that you say needs to be increased. I've reached out to the minister on this issue because it is a recurring issue over, recent weeks. And they have told us that the province has made education a top priority. Investments next year, for example, over $8.2 billion, including special grants, is going to districts, and that's more than 50% over 2016 and 2017. And they say that districts are now receiving more than $13,600 per student in funding because of steady increases. Now, what do you think of that?
Well, I think that increases go up because there's more students. But also there's...
But the per student funding, has that gone up?
Not in enough that it needs to. We're in a time now where there's so many increases and everything costs more. And so it hasn't kept up with inflation.
Inflation is what you're concerned about. Okay. So let's take some calls here now. Jake is on the line in Victoria as well. Hi, Jake. Hi, Jake. Are you there? I think we've lost Jake. Anne is calling from Gibsons now. Hi, Anne.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for calling. What are your concerns when it comes to school programs?
Well, having worked in my school district a few decades back as a casual custodian, I was just appalled. They're going to fire all the full-time custodians and have people come in on an on-call basis? Like what? The school gets dirty enough, the garbage is piled up for a few days, and then they're going to call someone in? Like when I was doing it, we never had enough time to clean everything thoroughly anyway. I mean, those schools need to be cleaned on a daily basis for health reasons. Like, somebody thinks this isn't important because it's a job they think only stupid people do. But it is an important job.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. It is a health and safety issue. And so, what goes through your mind when you hear that perhaps it's being considered an expendable resource, Anne?
I just think that that's not a frill. Neither is art and music and things like that frills either. But like keeping the school clean is something that has to happen. This provincial government, this NDP provincial government, is really out of touch, and they're out of touch with their original principles too. Like, they are supposed to be supporting good education.
And thank you so much for the call, and really good to hear from you as someone who did work as a custodian, an important job. And so, Alex, what have you heard about how this is going to work? Going from, is it 34 full-time employed custodian positions to, is it 6?
Yeah, so there's going to be 6 schools that still have a full-time daytime custodian. So that's going to be our 6 largest elementary schools. And it's going to look like one custodian is being shared by 4 schools. So if you have an issue, you'd contact that custodian. So some of our concerns are, in the morning, one of the jobs the custodian does is they walk around the outside of the school and they look for broken glass and if there's any needles on the playground or anything unsafe. And there's not going to be enough time from when the custodians start in the morning to do that at 4 different schools. Also things just like unlocking gates, bringing out garbage and recycling bins before it, that sort of thing. But the main issue that I think that students and teachers are really going to notice is all of the things that happen during the day, all of the fluids that happen in an elementary school. So that could be blood, vomit, bathroom emergencies in primary classrooms. They regularly happen in the classroom, in the hallway, in the bathrooms, and having to wait an hour, having to evacuate a classroom so that it can be dealt with because you can't be around those sorts of things is going to be a huge issue.
Yeah, poor little things who have to deal with washroom accidents. So who would have to deal with that then? I mean, would it fall to teachers?
No, so teachers won't be doing that.
Okay.
Currently, some of that happens as administrators do that if there's an issue where the custodian's not there, but they're going to be calling the custodian in. So we're not really sure what that will look like. Is a class going to have to go down into the hallway? But I mean, I've had experiences where a student has vomited from the classroom all the way down the hallway to the bathroom. And so then what do you do in that sort of situation?
Yeah. Lisa is up next now in Nelson. What are your concerns when it comes to school programs and impending cuts, Lisa?
My biggest concern, sorry, I was just doing some calculating here. In our school district, the budget is only changing by 0.8%, or the projected budget, I guess.
Okay, in terms of cuts?
And that's in SD8.
Okay.
But the district administration budget is increasing by almost 3%, and the student budget is decreasing by 2%. So, and this has been a trend in our district for several years now where they've been very top-heavy. They keep hiring more managers, and we don't really see a benefit to that in the classroom. And in my own circumstance, both of my children now are doing an online blended learning program because they were not successful in a regular classroom. One has autism, and because she's a girl and quiet, she was not well supported. She also has dyslexia, which there's many issues with the BC curriculum. And the other child she loved school last year, and then all of a sudden she wouldn't go. There was a child in her class that was not well supported, and she's very noise sensitive, and it became not a safe place for her anymore because that child just screamed when he was not supported. So,
yeah. And how are
they're
they
really doing their learning at home?
Oh, and how is that going?
It has its own challenges, but homeschooling was never my dream job. But
right,
so
and so in terms of choice, this is something that it wasn't a first choice for you, but given the lack of resources or lack of support that your children faced, this is what it's come to.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Lisa, thank you so much. And do you know, has this budget been passed for your school district then for next year?
Yes.
Yeah.
It has been passed. On May 13th.
Yeah, Lisa, thank
I was
you.
just looking because I missed the meeting and anyway, so yeah.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for sharing that. Really appreciate hearing from you. Yeah, are you hearing about that? What about administrative costs? Is that a separate budget? And are you looking at kind of a bloated administrative segment?
We aren't really in Burnaby, but that is definitely an issue in some districts. And just on what she said about her students not receiving the supports, the BCTF just recently did a survey, and only 13% of teachers found that they were fully meeting the needs of those students with special needs and diverse needs in their classroom. 13%, yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Thanks so much for that call from Nelson. Let's head to Surrey now, and Kyle is a parent as well. Hi, Kyle.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you for taking me.
Yeah. What are your concerns?
I was in a situation, actually, my son was in a situation where his class, my son is actually on the spectrum, and he had an EA for a couple of years. It was one-on-one, and then eventually she got added more children, and then eventually it got to the point where she ended up having 7 children on her own.
7, wow.
Yeah. 7, and my son, he's extremely intelligent, as long as you can get him to focus, and so he was falling extremely behind the lines over 2 years, to the point where they thought he was going to have to get held back, and we couldn't let that happen. So we looked around. We found a private school that specializes with children with disabilities. Unfortunately, it's not cheap, and it's pretty much in the Burnaby borderline. So me and my partner, we both decided to get extra jobs and to pay for it. And now he is thriving. He just graduated grade 7, and he's just doing amazing. But from going from under the radar for EAs having to have 7 children is just ridiculous.
That's quite something. One-on-one to 7, 7 kids and sharing that attention. So Kyle, we had someone call in earlier to saying, why is their public funding still going to private schools? And here you are feeling that there wasn't enough in terms of resources for your child in the public school system, and you've turned to the private school system. So what are your thoughts about public funding going to a school like where your son has been going?
Well, that's the thing. Like, every student that is registered under the autism spectrum, they actually get a large percent of money that goes towards their school specifically, so that they have EAs and they have what they need. But the thing is, it doesn't go like that. It goes towards who needs it most. So all that batch of money goes towards, if one kid is worse than the other, more money will go towards that kid than the others. So that's what happens. So
It depends on designation.
exactly. So it's not spaced out properly. If it was spaced out properly, I think they'd be able to hire more EAs. And, it's a horrible situation, unfortunately.
Wow. Thanks for sharing your story with us, Kyle. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you taking my time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And so, Alex, what do you think needs to change then? You've talked about the need for more funding, but what about the structure in terms of funding for schools?
Well, I think, like what he brought up, there is a huge issue with not enough educational assistance. And that was one of the promises the province made was that there'd be an EA in every primary classroom. And a lot of it has to do with it takes such a long time for students to get designations that there's most primary classes have students that are just waiting several years to get a psych ed assessment so they can get a designation.
Right.
And then he's correct. It goes on based on need. The schools get a number of EAs and then they have to spread them out over students. And not all students that have learning needs or learning difficulties bring in funding for an EA. And so it's really unfortunate that they are shared amongst quite a few students.
So that would be something you'd want to be looked at as well.
Yeah.
It's obviously an ongoing issue. I know the budget's been passed in Burnaby, but various school districts still, I know on the island, are still looking to vote, I think, on Monday next week. So something that we'll watch for these days and these weeks, but also obviously what happens next year.
Yes.
We'll try to follow up with the province as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Alex Peters is president of the Burnaby Teachers Association, joining us in studio. You're with BC Today here on CBC, live on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming as well on CBC British Columbia's YouTube page. And on radio, if you're tuning in Metro Vancouver, here's what's coming up on the Coast with Amy.
Good afternoon, Michelle. It's Amy Bell filling in once again for Gloria Makarenko here on the Coast. And coming up on our show today, it's Thursday, so that means it is time for our Soapbox Social panel to reconvene to look at some of the top political stories of the week. As always, there is plenty of fodder for them to choose from. And our money columnist, Mark Ting, will be here with a look at the housing market. And he's going to speak about how potential buyers can make the most of the current situation. That is on the Coast starting today at 3 o'clock, and I hope you can join us.
$12:49 now. You're with BC Today. About 4 years ago, Vancouver Island saw what is considered to be the largest act of civil disobedience in Canadian history. The Fairy Creek protests have been put into a film.
Protesters have set up a blockade preventing logging near the Fairy Creek watershed.
It's pretty rare to find a fully intact valley of old growth forest like this. Everything else has been logged.
It's one of the rare places that we haven't interfered.
You are us. Welcome to us.
People believe that we have to save every last old growth tree, but I don't believe that's true.
We have kids to feed. From one savagery to the other is the end game of this logging.
This is where social change comes from. Ordinary people deciding that wrong is wrong.
Who keeps
keeps us safe.
We keep us safe.
You have your tactics, but you will not stop me from doing the work that we need to do.
The film Fairy Creek documents the protests that took place in 2020 and 2021 against old-growth forest logging in the Fairy Creek watershed, northeast of Port Renfrew. That blockade made international headlines. More than 1,100 people were arrested. And the film has been screened at a number of film festivals, including Whistler Film Festival. It's showing this weekend in Vancouver, Victoria, Nanaimo, and Lasqueti Island. We're giving away two free pairs of tickets to the Vancouver screening at the Rio Theatre this Saturday, June 7th at 6:30 p.m. If you'd like the tickets, you can send us an email, bctoday@cbc.ca, for your chance to win them. Joining me now are the filmmakers of the Fairy Creek documentary. Jen Muranetz is the film's director, and Sepehr Samimi is the producer and director of photography. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
This really was big news in 2020 and 2021. Jen, why did you want to document these events?
Well, we actually arrived at the blockade long before it became big news. So we got on the ground in the early days when there was really only about a dozen people sitting around a campfire. And the reason we went there was just because I have a personal connection to Vancouver Island. My parents were raised there. My grandparents were raised there. My previous films were also around environmental topics. And so this film just drew my interest. We didn't know at the time that it would blow up and become Canada's largest act of civil disobedience. We just were there to make a film from the beginning.
What was it like for you to realize that it was growing, to see the increasing tensions as they continued?
Yeah, well, for us, I think Sepehr really joined kind of at that crux as it began to kind of blow up, as we say, and really evolve into this massive movement. And as it was happening, everything was happening in rapid time, and we were just trying to keep up with where our film subjects were, the amount of camps that were growing, the amount of blockades, the tensions that were happening on the ground. And when we stepped away, we got to see that kind of bird's eye view that the broader public was seeing, which is that this was a massive movement that was getting a lot of attention on media worldwide.
And so, Sepehr, what stands out for you then when you joined in?
Well, when I arrived, it was the first day of the police enforcement. So I arrived as just a test out to see how the environment is and if we can collaborate together on this project. And it happened to be that day, as I arrived, police arrived too. And that was the start of our sort of main production. And I stayed for 2 weeks. So all of a sudden, it was a very different environment as soon as the police arrived.
What was important for you to tell in that story then?
For me, I think what was really touching on a human level was how these people put their bodies on the line and stand up for something that they believed in. And I think what we think is something that leaves people with after watching this film is actually how this really worked. It really saved the trees and or at least temporary or maybe permanently protected them. And I think that message of possibility that if you stand up for something that actually could work could be something hopeful in our times where there's a lot of other front lines and battles that are ongoing.
Right. And so this past January, the province extended the deferrals, the protections around deferring logging in the Fairy Creek watershed. And now that's going to go till September of next year. That's about 1,200 hectares of what is the crown land in the Fairy Creek watershed in the Pachidat First Nations territory. And so, Jen, for yourself, you just talked about how putting this into context of other kind of events of civil disobedience, this has been compared a lot, right, to the Clayoquot Sound protests in the 1990s. You know, how do you see this in terms of BC's history?
Mm-hmm. I think BC has a very long and storied history of frontline movements within forestry and logging specifically. Clayoquot Sound was a very memorable one. There were people that I had met at Fairy Creek, that we both met at Fairy Creek, that had been to both Clayoquot Sound and then were at Fairy Creek, and they would speak to the differences. I think, 30 years ago when Clayoquot Sound was happening, things apparently felt a little bit more theatrical in nature, or even a little bit more civil between the dynamics between the protesters and the RCMP, for example. This time around, there's a lot more at stakes. There really is, a lot more that's been happening with extractive resources. There's a larger population globally, and there's also a lot more involvement with Indigenous rights and Indigenous land defenders on the ground, and just acknowledging that the land is their unceded territory. And so that creates a different dynamic than what happened 30 years ago. But it's the same story repeating in that people in this province really believe protecting old growth is a worthwhile thing to do.
And you see in the film, forestry workers saying, "I'm just trying to feed my children." So what do you say to people who have been relying on the industry? It is something that is of concern right now, especially with the tariffs from the United States. How do you see, the protections that have been put in place for this watershed, and how do you balance that with, the reliance of BC communities on forestry in BC?
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. BC really does rely on forestry. It's a massive part of the economy and just a part of the history in general of this province. And I think the reality is that there just isn't the same amount of old growth now than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And so transitioning is an important thing. There is still, lots of second growth and third growth out there. And so I think that there's more conversations at play, not only with logging, but also talking about land in general, who gets the right to log the land. This land is unceded, most of it here in British Columbia. So it's part of a bigger conversation. For us, we're filmmakers, we felt really curious to get there and embed ourselves with the people and learn why this was so important to them. And we're allowing the viewers to kind of draw their own conclusions on how they feel about forestry, activism, and the larger themes in the film.
And Sepehr, what do you hope, I have just about 30 seconds left, but what do you hope people take away from your film?
I spoke earlier about that message of hope, but I think our approach in this film was to not really take any sides. This is a film that stands in between many factions and groups like the police, the loggers, the protesters, the Indigenous people, where their land this is happening. And we want the viewer to really take a good view of all sides and draw their own conclusion.
It is beautifully shot. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.